Today's lesson is 8.4, which is called quadratics in vertex form. Now, one thing I forgot to mention was kind of the progression here. So in 8.1 and 8.2, we basically looked at ax squared plus c. So we did not have the middle term. And in 8.3, so yesterday's lesson, we call that standard. So we include the middle term. So this has got the bx. So this is called standard. Now in 8.4, they're going to show you what vertex form is. And in 8.5, they're going to show you what's called intercept form. So essentially, and really the majority of this lesson, because there's actually 6 lessons, so there is a 6th one, but in the beginning part of this chapter, they're really just showing you 3 different ways to look at a quadratic. What it reminds me of is when you were in Algebra A, and I don't remember what chapter, but remember how you had slope, intercept, and so you have y equals ax plus b, or ax mx plus b, okay? Then remember we added on point slope. And so we showed you a new one that was y minus y1, and then m, and then x minus x1. But remember that they were actually the same. So in a way, we're doing that with quadratics. We're showing you different forms, really, of the same equation. So our goal is really just to get you to understand how to read these. We are not necessarily going to go from one to the other or vice versa. We're just trying to get you to understand how to read them, okay? So first, I guess, what is vertex form? Vertex form, just trying to position my paper here, vertex form looks like this. So we have y equals essentially a x minus h quantity squared, and then plus k. So that's what vertex form looks like. And once you kind of get the hang of it, it's actually not too bad. So your h and your k are actually your vertex. That is your, you just pull your numbers right from the formula. Okay, remember that the first number is kind of like your horizontal movement. So this is your horizontal translation. Your k is your plus or minus, so this is going to be your vertical movements. So they are still going to ask us for a comparison. You can see it down here below. And really, it's very similar to what we did in yesterday's lesson where we're going to do the vertex first. So notice that the comparison is not actually until the bottom. It's a little bit harder to do the comparison right from the beginning because we don't necessarily have the constant out here. Sometimes we do. If you look down at like a numbers 3 and 4, we have the constant out there. But it's easier to do the comparison at the end. Now your A is still going to be your vertical stretch or shrink depending on what that number is. So that part did not change. But this right here is what we call vertex form. Now, you're not going to have to write that down. It's not like you necessarily have to memorize it. But when you're given a problem, you are going to have to be able to read it, okay? So let's take this first one. They want us to state them, and then they want us to do a rough sketch of the graph of it. So the 5 is our A. So that's like our vertical stretch. So that's just going to make it skinnier. This is our H. And then notice this would be our K, but there's nothing there. So we're going to pull this out as a 2. Now the subtraction sign is from the formula. So the H is just 2. You almost have to kind of ignore that. So we're going to go 2, comma, our K value, but there's nothing there. So then it's just 2, 0. So again, if you think of the graph, you're moving right to, but you're not going anywhere up or down. So we have our axis of symmetry. It's just the first number. Our domain doesn't change. And now our range. Which way is this opening? So take a look at this 5 and notice it's positive. So that means it opens up, right? Kind of think of up with the smiley face there. So it's opening up and it's kind of skinny. So it looks like that. So we're going to do y is greater than or equal to, because it's opening up, Now be careful here though. Your eyes might be drawn to the 2. That's the x coordinate. You need to look at the y coordinate, which is a 0. So its y is greater than or equal to 0. And now let's do our comparison. So we start right here and there's no negative, so we don't have a reflection, but we do have a vertical stretch of 5. And then now, if you think about the original, where the original was, we moved right 2. So we would say horizontal translation right 2. And if you remember back when we did absolute value, we did these with absolute value. It would have looked something like this, where we would have done like x minus 2. And so absolute value, it shifted it right 2, and then we've got the V shape. Okay, so you've already done these, and the same rule applies, is whenever you're inside the parentheses, it's always kind of the opposite. Okay, so number 2 is very similar. So if you want to pause the video here and try it, and then we can come back together and try number 3, because number 3 is adding on that extra component. So go ahead and pause it and give it a try. All right, number 2. So this is my A, this is my H, and then there is no K again. So when I do my vertex, you just have to be careful because this is a plus. So that's really x minus a negative 8. The only way to get a plus sign is to have 2 negatives, because remember, the original had a subtraction in it. So this must be a negative 8, and then there is no K value. And if you want to test it, you can type this into your calculator again if you want to give this a try, just to kind of, maybe at the first couple ones because you're not so sure. Just make sure you put the x plus 8 in parentheses and then quantity squared. And then you've got no K value, and go ahead and hit graph. Oh, we're still on that zoom feature, so give me a second, it's going to graph it. But you can see that it moved 8, but here, let me just go zoom 6. Takes me back to my 10 by 10. Zoom 6. So do you notice how it moved left 8? But again, there's no K value. So it's okay to type these into your calculator until you get more comfortable. So we have our axis of symmetry, and if we want to go ahead and graph it, we're going to go negative 8, and then we've got our range, our domain, and then our range, notice, it's opening down because of the negative, and we saw that on the calculator as well. You can see how it's opening down. So if it opens down, then this must be less than. But be careful that your eyes don't grab this negative 8. That's the x coordinate. We want the y coordinate. So we didn't move up or down. Remember, that's the K part. Okay, so that's from the K. That's the vertical piece. So let's do our comparison. We've got this negative 4 out front. So the negative is going to be a reflection over the x-axis. The 4 is going to make it a little skinny. So we've got a vertical stretch of 4. And then notice from the original, if this was the original, if that was the parent, we flipped it, we stretched it, and we shift it over. So we're going to say horizontal left 8. Okay? All right, let's try one. And today's a fairly short lesson. These are the only 2 examples I have left. I don't have another page for you today, so it's a fairly short one. Notice on this one, we've just added on this additional piece. So we still have our A, our H, and our K. Now they've had to switch letters here because we're not in standard anymore. This is called vertex. So that's why we're using different letters. There's no more B in our C, okay? So our vertex is just going to be the H and the K. But remember, you have to pull this out as the opposite. So it looks like a negative. It's going to come out as a positive 1. The K is what it is. The K does not change. And again, if you're not feeling so comfortable yet, that's okay. We can type them in. It just takes me a second to type it in. Make sure I typed it in right. Yep, and let's hit graph. Notice where that vertex is. 1, see how it shifted over 1? and then up 4. Sometimes I wish the graphing calculator would put like a big old dot right there so you could actually see the vertex, but you just have to kind of watch for it turning, all right? So now we've got our axis of symmetry, which is the x value. We've got our domain. And if we want to do our rough sketch, that will help us with our range. So we went over 1, up 4. So over 1 and up 4. And because it's negative, it's going down. So it opens down, which means this is going to be the less than symbol. So if it opens up, it's the greater than symbol. If it opens down, it's the less than. And now we just use our y coordinate. So do you see how the highest point is at 4 and then it's going down? Now they did not ask us in this lesson about max and min. I know they did it in yesterday's lesson. So if we were asked, do you see how it's the highest? So then this would just be a maximum if we were asked. So it's like, hey, you might as well ask me because it's kind of a free point. But if they do, great. If they don't, no big deal. So let's do our comparison. We know it's going down. So that means the negative was a reflection over the x-axis. The 1/2 is just going to make it wider. So we call that a vertical shrink of 1/2. Notice this one moved it right. So we're going to say horizontally right 1. And the 4 moved it up. So we're going to say vertically up 4. Okay? So definitely, if you didn't try that one on your own, because I know that K was a little new, go ahead and pause the video here and try number 4. All right, hopefully you tried number 4. We have your A, your H, and your K. So just remember when you pull this out, because the original formula had a subtraction in it, the only way to get this actually to work, because remember, here's the original. This is the original. So this had to have been x minus a -1 in order for it to become a plus. But the K value is just -5. That just stays. You don't have to do a double. I mean, if you want to do a double negative, you could, kind of like that. But notice then it's just your -5. So the K value is what it is. So we have -1, -5. And then our axis of symmetry is going to be the x value. We've got our free domain. And if we want to do a rough sketch, we're going to go -1 and then like -5. And so here would be our vertex. And then ask yourself, which way is it opening? So the negative makes it open down. So we know this is going to be less than. There's not really a number there. It's just a 1. So a 1 is the parent. Whenever you don't have a number out front, it's just the parent. So this is going to be -5 and smaller. And so now we just have to quick do our comparison. In a way, we've already done the comparison as we were speaking and going through the vertex. We've done the comparison. We just have to fill it in. So we have a reflection over the x-axis. That's the negative because it makes it go down. We don't have a vertical stretch or shrink, so we don't have to fill that one in. But notice we moved left 1. So we say horizontally left 1. And then notice the -5. So we went vertically down 5. And so that wraps up vertex form. And as I said at the beginning, now we're going to do intercept form for tomorrow. And then 8-6 is kind of a comparison. It's kind of a strange place where you're just kind of comparing them. But for right now, we just want you to kind of practice the different forms.